The evening at the Grand Crest Hotel was one of those nights where everything seemed to sparkle. The chandeliers glowed like captured stars, and the polished marble floor reflected the light so perfectly that every guest seemed to shine. Expensive perfume hung in the air, soft music played from the grand piano in the corner, and laughter filled the room as the city's wealthiest people enjoyed the charity gala. It was a place of class, confidence, and money. Among the crowd of elegant suits and glittering dresses, a young waitress moved quietly between the tables. Her uniform was neat but simple. She carried a tray of champagne glasses, carefully balancing them as she moved between guests who barely noticed her. Her name was Lena. She had been working there for almost a year, mostly silent, always polite. Most people saw her as part of the background, someone who belonged to the service, not the spotlight. But Lena wasn't just another waitress. Behind her calm eyes was a story no one knew. She had once dreamed of becoming a pianist. Music had been her escape when life got too hard. Her mother taught her how to play when she was a child, using a broken keyboard they'd found at a second-hand shop. Even though half the keys didn't work, Lena loved it. Every evening after finishing her chores, she would sit for hours trying to make it sound right. Her mother used to say, "If you can make something broken sound beautiful, you'll always have music inside you." Those words stayed with her long after her mother was gone. Now, as she moved between the rich guests laughing over their glasses of wine, Lena couldn't help glancing toward the piano in the corner. It was a beautiful black Steinway, the kind she had only seen in magazines. The musician playing it now was good, but he played like someone following notes, not like someone who felt them. She could tell. She could almost hear how differently she would have played it. Softer here, a pause there, a note held just long enough to make someone's heart ache. But that was a dream from another life, and dreams didn't pay bills. Lena was so lost in thought that she almost bumped into a man standing near the buffet table. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit, and had the confident air of someone who was used to being noticed. He turned as she apologized quickly. "It's all right," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You look distracted. Not bored of the party already, I hope?" "No, sir," Lena said softly, steadying her tray. He studied her for a moment, then followed her gaze toward the piano. "Ah," he said. "You play?" Her heart jumped a little. "I used to," she replied quietly. "A long time ago." "A waitress who plays piano," he said, amused. "That's not something you hear every day." She smiled awkwardly, unsure how to respond. The man chuckled, clearly entertained. "Do you think you could play that thing?" he asked, nodding at the piano. She hesitated. "I haven't played in years," he shrugged. "Then maybe you should. Give us a show." A few people nearby turned their heads, curious. Lena's face turned red. "Oh no, I couldn't, I'm working." But he didn't let it go. "Come on, it's just a bit of fun," he said. "If you play one song and impress me, I'll double your night's pay." Lena froze. Her manager's voice echoed in her mind. "Don't draw attention to yourself. Stay professional. No talking with guests longer than needed." But the thought of doubling her pay was tempting. Rent was due in 3 days, and she was already calculating how much she could stretch what she had. Still, she shook her head. "Thank you, sir, but I really shouldn't." The man raised an eyebrow. "Afraid you'll embarrass yourself?" A few guests chuckled. The sound made her chest tighten. She hated being laughed at, but she also hated the arrogance in his tone. The headwaiter walked past and gave her a warning glance. "Keep serving table 7, he whispered quickly. "Don't do anything foolish." Lena nodded, but her heart wasn't calm. She looked again at the piano. Her fingers twitched slightly at her side. When she returned with another tray, the same man called out to her again. "You sure you won't try? I'll even make it easier, play anything. Just 10 seconds of real music. If you can make me stop talking, I'll give you more than double." The way he said it, half playful, half challenge, stirred something inside her. She didn't like being a joke. She didn't like being looked down on as though she couldn't possibly do more than serve drinks. Without realizing it, her feet started moving. She set the tray down on a nearby table. The room noticed. A few guests whispered, amused to see the waitress walk toward the piano. Her heart thudded in her chest. She could feel her hands trembling as she reached the polished black instrument. She wasn't dressed for a stage. Her uniform was plain, her shoes scuffed from long shifts. But when she placed her fingers on the keys, something in her changed. It was like stepping into a world she once knew well. The chatter around her softened, some people laughing, others waiting for her to make a fool of herself. She took a slow breath, closed her eyes, and remembered her mother's voice. Make something broken sound beautiful. At first, she pressed one key, then another. The sound was pure, smooth, deep, alive. Her fingers found their rhythm slowly, searching through old memories. Then suddenly it came back, that feeling she thought she had lost. Her hands began to move on their own, weaving notes together like threads of memory. The melody was soft at first, like a whisper. Then it grew stronger, fuller. It wasn't a song from any book. It was one she had made herself years ago, sitting in her mother's kitchen, dreaming about a life she never had. Within seconds, the laughter stopped. The guests turned to listen. Even the servers paused in place. The sound was unlike anything they expected. There was no showy speed, no practiced perfection, just raw feeling. Every note seemed to carry a story of loss, hope, love, and quiet strength. The man who had dared her stood still, his smirk gone. He couldn't look away. The music touched something in him he didn't understand. Lena forgot about the crowd, the hotel, everything. She played as if she were alone in the world, just her and the piano. Her fingers moved with emotion, not skill, and that emotion filled the room like a wave. When she finished, the last note hung in the air for a moment before fading. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. You could hear the faint hum of the lights and the soft rustle of someone taking a breath. Then slowly, people began to clap. It started softly, then grew louder. Some guests stood. The pianist who had been playing earlier stared at her in disbelief. Even the staff, who had seen every kind of event in that hotel, looked amazed. Lena stood up quickly, embarrassed by the attention. Her cheeks were flushed, her hands shaking. She gave a small, awkward smile and tried to step away from the piano, but the man, the billionaire, approached her. He looked at her closely, his expression completely changed. "Who taught you to play like that?" he asked quietly. Lena looked down. "No one, really. I just learned from my mother. She taught me before she passed away." He nodded slowly, still watching her. "That was incredible," he said, almost to himself. Lena didn't know what to say. She just wanted to disappear back into her quiet space behind the serving area. But he stopped her. "You shouldn't be serving drinks," he said softly. "You should be on a stage." She gave a small, sad smile. "Life doesn't always go that way," she said. "But thank you." Before she could walk away, the guests began clapping again, louder this time. The head waiter looked shocked, unsure whether to scold her or be proud. The billionaire reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. "Come see me tomorrow," he said. "I have a music foundation. I'd like to hear you play again." Lena looked at the card, unsure if it was real or just something he said in the moment. She took it anyway, tucking it into her apron pocket. As she returned to the kitchen area, her co-workers looked at her wide-eyed. "What was that?" one whispered. Lena just smiled faintly. "I guess I finally played again." She didn't know what would happen next. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. But for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. That night after the gala ended, Lena stayed behind to help clean the hall. The other staff kept whispering about her. Some smiled at her. Others looked surprised that she had actually played the piano in front of everyone. The head waiter didn't say much, but before leaving, he gave her a look that wasn't angry, more like he didn't know what to do with what he'd just seen. When the guests had gone and the music stopped, the big hall felt strangely empty. The tables were half cleared, glasses still half full, and napkins scattered. Lena picked up plates quietly, her mind far away. She could still feel the keys under her fingers, still hear the soft echo of the melody she played. She took a deep breath and smiled faintly to herself. For those few minutes, she hadn't been a waitress. She had felt alive again, like the person she once dreamed of being. But as the lights dimmed and her shift ended, she told herself not to think too much about it. People like the billionaire made big promises all the time. They forgot the next day. Maybe he'd already moved on to some other event, some other charity dinner. When she changed out of her uniform and walked out into the cool night, the city lights flickered around her. The air smelled faintly of rain and car smoke. She clutched her small purse and started walking to the bus stop. Her feet ached, but her heart felt lighter. On the bus ride home, she pulled out the card he had given her. It was thick, expensive-looking, with his name embossed in silver letters. Below it was the address of his foundation. She turned it over in her hands again and again, wondering if she should go. At home, her small apartment was quiet. The walls were thin, and she could hear the muffled sound of a TV from the next door. She put her bag down and looked around. A cracked teacup sat on the counter. The same old photo of her mother sat beside the lamp, her mother smiling, hands on the old keyboard they once had. Lena sat on the couch and stared at the photo for a long time. "You'd laugh if you saw me tonight," she whispered. I actually played again. The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual. She had another shift at the hotel that evening, but her thoughts were stuck on that card. She made herself a cup of tea, sat by the small window, and read the name again. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe he hadn't meant it seriously. But something inside her whispered that she had to try. By noon, she had made up her mind. She put on her cleanest clothes, a plain white blouse and a long skirt, and tied her hair neatly. She didn't have anything fancy, but she looked presentable. She checked the bus routes twice and finally stepped outside. The foundation building was in one of the nicest parts of the city. When she arrived, she almost turned around. The tall glass doors, the marble lobby, and the polished floors made her feel completely out of place. She stood there for a moment, holding the card tightly. Then the receptionist at the front desk noticed her. "Can I help you, ma'am?" the woman asked politely. "Yes," Lena said softly. "I'm here to see Mr. Harlow. He told me to come today. He gave me this." She handed over the card carefully. The receptionist looked surprised for a moment, then smiled. "One moment, please." She made a quick phone call, then nodded. "You can go right in. He's expecting you." Lena's heart began to pound. She followed the directions down a long hallway lined with framed photos of musicians, smiling children at pianos, and charity concerts. When she entered the office, she saw him by the window, looking out at the city below. He turned when she stepped in. "You came," he said with a smile that seemed more genuine than before. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted. He gestured for her to sit. "I meant what I said last night. I want to hear you play again. That wasn't luck, what you did. That was something real." She looked down, unsure what to say. "I haven't played much lately," she said softly. "Not since my mother died. After that, I just stopped." He nodded, listening. "You have talent that people spend their lives chasing. You can't just let that go." She smiled faintly. "Talent doesn't pay rent." That made him laugh a little. "True, but sometimes it can change your life if you let it." He stood up and motioned toward a door. "Come with me. I want to show you something." They walked into a large room with a grand piano in the center. The light from the tall windows fell across its surface like a spotlight. Lena stood still, staring at it. "Go ahead," he said. "Play whatever comes to you." She hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly. It felt strange, standing there in front of a perfect piano, knowing this wasn't her world. But when she touched the keys, everything else disappeared again. The sound filled the room, soft and warm. She didn't play a complex song, just a simple melody she used to hum while walking home from work. But it was honest, full of feeling. When she stopped, the silence in the room felt heavy, like the music still lingered in the air. The man nodded slowly. "You're even better in the daylight," he said quietly. "Would you be willing to come here a few times a week? We have teachers, students. You could help with lessons, maybe even learn more yourself. I'll pay you." Lena's eyes widened. "Pay me to play?" "To play," he said with a smile. "And to teach. You have something rare, not just skill but emotion. That's what music really is." She felt tears sting her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he replied simply. And she did. Over the next few weeks, Lena's life began to shift. She still worked part-time at the hotel, but now she spent her mornings at the foundation. She met young students who looked up to her, even though she often felt she didn't belong there. The teachers were kind, impressed by her ear for melody. Some days they'd ask her to improvise for the students, and every time she played, people stopped to listen. One afternoon, the billionaire visited the class. He stood quietly at the back, watching her play a duet with one of the students. When the song ended, he clapped softly and said, "You were born for this." Lena laughed shyly. "Born to serve tea and play pianos, maybe." He shook his head. "Born to remind people what music really means." Still, she stayed humble. Every evening, she went home to her small apartment, cooked a simple meal, and kept her mother's picture beside her piano notebook. She didn't tell many people about her new job. It felt too fragile, too special to share yet, but one evening, something unexpected happened. At the foundation, one of the instructors mentioned that there would be a small public recital in 2 weeks. It was a charity event to raise funds for children's music programs. "You should play," they told her. Lena's heart skipped a beat. "Me? No, I'm not ready," but everyone encouraged her. Even the billionaire stopped by the next day and said, "You'll be perfect. People need to hear you." She tried to refuse, but deep down she wanted to do it. She wanted to prove to herself, and maybe to her mother wherever she was, that she hadn't given up on her dream. For the next 2 weeks, Lena practiced every morning. Sometimes she stayed late after closing, alone in the music room, fingers moving over the keys until her hands ached. She wasn't aiming for perfection. She just wanted the music to feel real. The night before the recital, she stood by the piano in the empty hall and whispered, "If you're watching, Mom, I hope I make you proud." When she walked home that night, the city seemed different. The air felt lighter. She smiled without realizing it. She knew something inside her had changed forever. The day of the recital came faster than Lena expected. When she woke up that morning, her hands felt cold and her stomach was tight with nerves. She hadn't felt this anxious in years. The last time she performed in front of people, she was a teenager, playing for her school's small music event. Now she was going to play in front of wealthy guests, music lovers, and donors. The same kind of people who once saw her as just a waitress. She tried to eat breakfast, but her appetite was gone. Instead, she sat by the window staring out at the city. The streets below were busy with cars and people rushing to work. But for her, time seemed to move differently. Every tick of the clock brought her closer to the evening that could change everything. At noon, she went to the foundation early. The staff was already setting up the stage. Rows of chairs lined the hall, lights being adjusted, sound tested. There was a quiet buzz of excitement. The children who would also perform were practicing in another room, their laughter echoing down the hallway. When the billionaire arrived, he smiled when he saw her. "Ready for tonight?" "Trying to be," she said nervously. "You'll be fine," he said confidently.
Just remember what you did that night at the hotel.
"You didn't play to impress anyone. You just played from your heart." "Do the same thing again." She nodded, taking his words in. But deep down, fear still tugged at her. What if she made a mistake? What if she froze? What if the audience didn't feel what she felt? In the afternoon, she sat at the piano alone, practicing softly. Every note echoed through the empty hall. She kept her eyes closed, focusing not on the sound, but on the memory. Her mother's laughter, the smell of their old kitchen, the cracked keyboard that started it all. That memory always grounded her. It reminded her why she played in the first place. As evening fell, the hall transformed. Guests arrived dressed in elegant clothes, talking and smiling, unaware of the storm of emotion waiting to unfold. Cameras flashed, waiters moved between tables with trays, and soft music played in the background. Lena stood backstage, watching through a small gap in the curtain. Her palms were sweaty. Her heart beat so hard she thought everyone could hear it. A fellow teacher placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You'll be amazing," she whispered. "Just breathe." One by one, the other performers went on stage, young students playing short, cheerful songs that made the crowd smile. The room filled with polite applause after each performance. Then the host stepped up to the microphone. "Our final performer this evening," he announced, "is someone whose story has inspired everyone here. She is proof that true talent can come from the most unexpected places. Please welcome Lena." For a moment, Lena couldn't move. The applause started softly, and the spotlight turned toward her. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her legs felt heavy, and the sound of her own heartbeat filled her ears. As she walked across the stage, her eyes swept over the audience. The lights were bright, but she could still make out faces. The billionaire sitting in the front row, the teachers who had supported her, and a few hotel staff who had come to cheer her on. She sat at the piano and rested her trembling hands on the keys. For a brief second, the hall felt too big, the silence too heavy. Then she took another slow breath and closed her eyes. The first note was soft, almost like a whisper. Then another followed, and another. Slowly the melody began to form, gentle, fragile, full of emotion. It was the same melody she had played that night at the hotel, but now it had grown. She had added new parts, new feelings, new memories. It wasn't just music anymore. It was her life. Every key she touched told a story, of struggle, of quiet strength, of moments when she almost gave up. The notes rose and fell like waves, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy. The audience stopped moving. The waiters froze where they stood. Even the cameras seemed to forget to flash. In the front row, the billionaire leaned forward slightly, his eyes focused only on her. He had seen many musicians in his life, world-famous ones, but none had played like this. Her music didn't come from training or perfection. It came from truth. Halfway through the piece, Lena opened her eyes and looked around. For the first time, she didn't feel nervous. She saw tears in the eyes of a woman in the second row. She saw a young boy smiling up at her with awe. She saw people holding hands without realizing it, as if her music had quietly connected them all. She smiled faintly and continued playing. The melody changed and brighter now, hopeful like sunlight after rain. The final notes shimmered through the hall, gentle and soft, before fading into silence. For a few seconds, no one moved. The room was so quiet that the sound of her breath could be heard. Then someone stood and started clapping. Another followed. Within moments, the entire hall was on its feet, applauding louder and louder. Lena blinked in disbelief. The sound surrounded her, warm and overwhelming. People were cheering, wiping tears, smiling. The billionaire stood too, clapping proudly. When the applause finally softened, the host returned to the stage. That, he said into the microphone, was not just a performance. That was a gift. Lena stood up slowly and bowed. Her hands trembled, but this time it wasn't from fear, and it was from emotion. She had never felt so alive, so seen. After the performance, many guests came to her. Some wanted to shake her hand. Others wanted to thank her for reminding them what real music felt like. A few even asked if she would perform at their events. She smiled politely, still dazed, still trying to believe it was real. When most of the guests had left, she found herself standing near the piano again, looking at it quietly. The billionaire approached her, his expression soft. "You did it," he said simply. "You made the whole room stop breathing." She laughed softly. "I was so nervous I almost didn't walk out there," he smiled. "That's the funny thing about fear. Sometimes it hides right before something beautiful happens." She looked at him gratefully. "Thank you for believing in me. If you hadn't dared me that night, I'd still be serving drinks." He shook his head. "No, you would have found your way eventually. People like you always do." She didn't argue. She just smiled. That night when Lena returned home, she didn't turn on the lights right away. She set her bag down, sat on the couch, and just sat there in the quiet. The city outside hummed softly, and through the window, she could see the faint reflection of herself, no longer the tired waitress she once was, but someone new. She looked at the photo of her mother and whispered, "I did it, Mom, I really did it." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were the kind that come when a dream starts to come true, not in a big sudden way, but gently, like the sound of piano keys at midnight. Over the next few days, her performance spread online. A guest had recorded it and posted it, and people began to share it everywhere. Comments poured in, strangers saying how her music had touched their hearts. Some said they cried listening to her. Some said it gave them hope. Lena couldn't believe it. She never imagined that the same music she once played in secret could reach so many people. The foundation received calls from music companies, journalists, and schools. Everyone wanted to know more about the woman who played with such emotion. But Lena didn't think about fame. She still woke up early, still made her tea, still practiced every morning. She stayed grounded, knowing that what truly mattered wasn't the attention. It was the music itself. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that this was only the beginning. The next morning, Lena woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop. At first, she thought it was just her friends from work. But when she checked, there were dozens of messages. Some were from numbers she didn't recognize. Others were from social media accounts she hadn't used in months. Her heart raced as she opened one of the messages. It was a link to a video, her performance from the night before. Someone had recorded it and posted it online. The caption read, "Waitress who stunned a billionaire's gala with her piano performance." Lena blinked in disbelief. The video already had thousands of views. Comments were flooding in. People from all over writing how her music made them cry, how they could feel her heart in every note. how they didn't even know her but felt proud of her. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Her small apartment suddenly felt too quiet for something so big. She sat down and covered her face with her hands, whispering, "This can't be real." A few minutes later, her phone rang again. It was the foundation office. The assistant's voice sounded excited. "Lena, you need to come in today. Mr. Harlow wants to see you right away." She got dressed quickly, her hands shaking the whole time. On the way there, she kept thinking of everything that had happened over the past few days. From being dared to play in a hotel, to having people around the world watching her. It felt like a dream she might wake up from any moment. When she arrived at the foundation, the place was busier than usual. People were on the phones talking about interviews, event requests, and media calls. Some smiled and congratulated her as she walked by. She knocked gently on the door to the billionaire's office. "Come in," his voice called. When she stepped inside, he looked up from a stack of papers, smiling. "There she is, and the woman the world can't stop talking about." Lena laughed nervously. "I didn't do anything special." He leaned back in his chair. "That's what makes it special. You didn't try to be anyone else. You just played your truth. That's what people felt." He motioned for her to sit. "I've had 3 different companies call me this morning. They all want to meet you. There are performance offers, interviews, and even a talk show request." Her eyes widened.
Me? But I'm not ready for that.
"I'm not famous," he smiled softly. "Fame isn't what you should focus on. What matters is what you do with this moment. You've been given a rare chance and a door that's opened for you. You just have to decide whether you'll walk through it." Lena stared at the floor for a long time. All of this feels too big. A few weeks ago, I was worried about paying rent. How people want to see me play on TV. "I understand," he said, "but that's how life works sometimes. It changes when you least expect it. You just have to stay true to who you are." She looked up at him. "What would you do if you were me?" He paused for a moment, then smiled. "I'd take the chance. Not for fame, not for money, but because you have something to share. The world needs more music that feels real." She nodded slowly, still unsure but moved by his words. Over the next few days, things changed faster than she could handle. The video kept spreading, and she started receiving invitations to play at different events. Reporters called her the hidden talent discovered by chance. Some even called her the humble pianist with a golden heart. It was strange reading about herself in newspapers. People recognized her at the cafe, on the bus, even at the grocery store. Some asked for selfies, others just smiled and told her they loved her story. But even with all the attention, Lena stayed grounded. She still helped out at the foundation, still taught the younger students, and still practiced in the quiet mornings when no one was around. That was the part of her life that felt real, not the flashing cameras or the interviews, but the stillness of music when no one was watching. One afternoon, while she was teaching a small group of children, Mr. Harlow walked into the classroom. The children greeted him happily, and he smiled back before turning to her. "Can I steal you for a moment?" She followed him to a side office where a few documents were laid out on the desk. "I've been thinking," he said. "There's an international charity concert happening next month in Paris. It's one of the biggest events in the music world. I've already spoken to the organizers. They'd like you to perform." Lena froze. "Paris?" He nodded. "They want your story and your music. You'd be playing alongside world-famous artists." She couldn't speak. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked at the invitation letter. Paris had been her mother's dream, the city of music, the place she always talked about when they played together. "I don't know what to say," Lena whispered. "Say yes," he said kindly. "You deserve this." That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. Going to Paris meant leaving her comfort zone completely. It meant stepping into a world she never imagined she'd be part of. What if she failed? What if she wasn't good enough? But then she remembered something her mother used to say. Fear means you're standing close to something worth doing. By morning, she had made her decision. She would go. The following weeks were full of preparation. The foundation helped her arrange everything: travel, accommodation, and rehearsals. Lena practiced every day until her fingers were sore. She didn't just want to perform, she wanted to make it meaningful. She wanted her music to carry the story of everyone who had ever been overlooked, everyone who had dreams but no stage to show them. On the day of her flight, She stood at the airport holding her small suitcase. She had never been on a plane before. As the city disappeared below her through the window, tears filled her eyes. She thought of her old life, the hotel trays, the long shifts, the nights she cried from exhaustion, and she whispered to herself, "This is for you, Mom." When she arrived in Paris, everything felt surreal. The city was alive with lights, sounds, and beauty everywhere she looked. The concert hall where she would perform was massive, with red velvet seats and golden balconies. Just walking onto the stage during rehearsal made her heart race. Mr. Harlow joined her later that day. He watched her practice quietly, smiling as she played. "You've come a long way from the hotel piano," he said softly. She looked up and smiled. "I still can't believe any of this is real." "Believe it," he replied. "You earned it." On the night of the concert, the hall was packed. People from around the world filled the seats. Famous musicians, reporters, and philanthropists were all there. As Lena stood backstage waiting for her turn, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She could almost hear her mother's voice again, calm, steady, loving. "Play like it's just you and the piano." When her name was announced, the applause echoed like thunder. She walked out slowly, her heart steady now. She sat down, touched the keys, and began to play. This time her music sounded even deeper than before. It carried the weight of her journey, the pain, the hope, the nights of doubt, and the beauty of never giving up. The audience listened in silence, drawn into her world. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. People stood, clapping and cheering. Some shouted her name. Cameras flashed and tears filled her eyes. As she stood and bowed, she spotted Mr. Harlow in the front row, clapping proudly. In that moment, she realized something important. Her journey wasn't just about proving herself. It was about showing that kindness, humility, and faith could turn even the smallest spark into a light big enough to fill a room. That night, when she looked out over the city of Paris from her hotel window, she smiled softly. She wasn't the same woman who once carried trays through crowded rooms. She was someone who had dared to play and changed her life forever. The morning after the concert in Paris, Lena woke up to sunlight slipping through the hotel curtains. For a few seconds, she lay still, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. It took her a moment to remember where she was and what had just happened. Then it all came back. The roaring applause, the standing ovation, the tears she saw in people's eyes when she finished her final note. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Dozens of messages again, journalists, fans, even music companies reaching out. There were articles with titles like "The Waitress Who Moved Paris to Tears" and "The Woman Who Played Straight from the Soul." Lena smiled, but her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through the messages. It all felt too big, too unreal. She was grateful, yes, but also scared. What came next? There was a soft knock on her door. When she opened it, she found Mr. Harlow standing there holding 2 cups of coffee. "You did it," he said with a warm smile, handing her 1 cup. "You made history last night?" Lena laughed quietly, shaking her head. "I just played a song." "Not just a song," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You played something people will remember. You gave them a piece of yourself." She looked down at the coffee in her hands. "It doesn't feel real yet." "It will," he said. "Give it time." They spent a quiet morning walking through the streets of Paris, visiting a small cafe near the river. People recognized her, and some stopped to thank her for her music. She smiled and spoke softly to each one, still not used to the attention. Before flying home, she visited a small park near the concert hall. There was an old piano there, one of those open community instruments anyone could play. She sat down and began to play a slow, gentle melody. A few people gathered around listening. For Lena, it was a reminder of where she started. Fame didn't matter. What mattered was that she still felt the same connection to music, pure and simple. When she returned home, everything felt different. The same city, the same apartment, but her life had completely changed. Her story had traveled around the world. Music schools were calling, offering her scholarships. Producers wanted her to record. Charities wanted her to perform at their events. At first, it was exciting. She traveled to new places, met musicians she had admired all her life, and performed for crowds larger than she ever imagined. Every time she played, she remembered the hotel piano, the night everything began. But slowly, something else started to change too. People began treating her differently. Some old friends stopped calling. Others only reached out when they wanted something. Even at the foundation, she noticed whispers when she walked into a room. People talking about how lucky she was, how she didn't deserve all this fame from one performance. Lena tried to ignore it, but it hurt. She still cleaned the piano after playing, still stayed late to help students, but the kindness she once felt around her seemed to fade. One evening, after a long rehearsal, she sat alone in the music room. Her fingers rested on the keys, but she couldn't play. The sound of laughter from the hallway made her chest tighten. She missed the quiet honesty of her old life, when music was her secret world, not something for everyone to judge. That night, she called her old friend from the cafe, who had watched her rise from the beginning. "Do you ever feel like everything's moving too fast?" Lena asked. Her friend laughed softly. "That's how it is when you start living the dream you once only imagined. But remember, you're still the same Lena who played for herself in that empty hotel lobby." Lena closed her eyes. "Sometimes I wish I could go back to that lobby." Her friend paused. "Then play like you're still there. Don't let anyone change why you love music." Those words stayed with her. A few days later, she decided to visit her old workplace, the hotel where it all began. She hadn't been there in months. When she walked in, a few of the staff recognized her immediately and rushed over, hugging her, congratulating her, showing her the video they still kept saved on their phones. It was emotional. She laughed and cried at the same time. Then she asked if she could play the piano again, the same one she had played the night she was dared by the billionaire. When her fingers touched the keys, everything else disappeared. The noise, the pressure, the expectations, and all of it faded. She played softly, the same melody she once played when no one believed in her. By the time she finished, a small crowd had gathered in the lobby. The applause was gentle, not overwhelming, and that felt right. Afterward, as she was leaving, an older woman who had been listening came up to her and said, "I don't know much about music, dear, but whatever that was, it healed something in me." That moment reminded Lena of why she played in the first place. Music wasn't about fame. It was about connection, invisible threads that tied people together, even strangers. In the weeks that followed, Lena began to make changes. She turned down big commercial deals that didn't feel right. Instead, she started focusing on using her music for causes that mattered, helping children learn, raising money for hospitals, performing for people who needed hope. Mr. Harlow noticed the change in her. "You could be making millions," he said one afternoon during a meeting. "Are you sure you want to do this the slow way?" Lena smiled. "The slow way is what brought me here. I don't need to rush anymore." He studied her for a moment and nodded with respect. "Then I'll support you however I can." They began working together on a new idea, a music program through the foundation that would give instruments and lessons to underprivileged kids. Lena visited schools, taught classes, and shared her story. Every time she saw a child light up when touching a piano for the first time, it reminded her of herself years ago, a girl who never stopped dreaming, even when no one was listening. But success still came with challenges. There were days when she felt overwhelmed, when the attention became too much. There were times she doubted herself, wondering if she could keep inspiring others while fighting her own insecurities. One evening, after finishing a concert for a children's hospital, she sat by herself in the empty hall. The lights were dim, and only the faint echo of applause remained. Mr. Harlow joined her quietly. "You look thoughtful," he said. She smiled faintly. "Just tired." But in a good way, he sat beside her. "Do you ever think about that night at the hotel?" "All the time," she replied. "It feels like another life," he nodded. "Funny, isn't it? A single dare changed everything." She looked down at her hands. "It wasn't the dare. It was the choice to believe in myself for once," he smiled. "And you did it beautifully." Lena leaned back, closing her eyes. "I just hope my mother would be proud." "She would," he said softly. She'd see that her daughter not only became a great musician, but a kind one. For a while they sat in silence, listening to the soft hum of the city outside. That night, when Lena got home, she sat at her piano and started composing something new, a piece that told her story without words. It began softly, like her first uncertain notes in the hotel lobby, then grew stronger, fuller, carrying traces of her journey, The pain, the courage, the faith, and the joy of finding her place in the world. As she played, tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't stop. This wasn't for the audience. It was for herself, and for everyone who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told they weren't enough. The next morning, when she played the new composition for the foundation team, everyone sat in silence. When the final note faded, even Mr. Harlow was speechless. "What will you call it?" he finally asked. Lena smiled softly. "The Dare." And with that, a new chapter began, not one defined by fame, but by purpose. Her music no longer just told her story. It gave others the courage to believe in theirs. Months passed, and life began to settle into a gentle rhythm again. Lena still performed at charity events and small concerts, but her heart was focused on her new mission, helping others find their voice through music. The Foundation's Music for Hope program had grown faster than anyone expected. Children from small towns and poor neighborhoods were getting their first lessons, some even performing at local events. Every time she visited one of the schools, she saw the same spark she once carried, the quiet hope that music could change everything. One afternoon, she stood in a small classroom watching a boy play the piano. His fingers were hesitant, but the sound was sweet and honest. When he finished, he looked up shyly and asked, "Did I do okay?" She smiled warmly. "You did more than okay. You played from your heart, and that's all that matters." The boy grinned, and Lena felt a lump rise in her throat. That feeling and that connection was what kept her going. Fame had come and gone like a wave, but this, she thought, was what it meant to truly make a difference. Later that evening, as she packed up her things, Mr. Harlow called her into his office. He looked unusually thoughtful. "I have something to tell you," he said. "Next month, the foundation is hosting its biggest annual gala yet, and they've asked you to perform again." She laughed softly. "You mean another fancy room full of rich people?" He chuckled. "Yes, but this time it's different. This year's theme is the power of second chances. They want you to be the closing act. You're not just the surprise anymore. You're the reason people will come." Lena froze for a moment, her heart pounding. The thought of going back to that kind of stage, and the one that had once changed her life, filled her with a strange mix of excitement and fear. "I don't know if I can top what happened last time," she said quietly. Mr. Harlow shook his head. "You don't have to top it. You just have to be yourself again. That's what people loved." She nodded slowly. "All right, I'll do it." The weeks leading up to the gala were filled with preparation. Lena practiced every day, but she also visited schools and hospitals, using her music to heal and bring comfort. She wanted her next performance to be more than entertainment. She wanted it to tell a story of resilience, kindness, and hope. When the night of the gala arrived, Lena stood backstage at the grand hall. The lights were bright, and the chatter of guests echoed through the room. It reminded her of that first night years ago, when she was still a waitress, holding a tray and trying to stay invisible. Now she was the reason everyone had gathered. Through a small gap in the curtain, she saw Mr. Harlow greeting the guests. He looked proud but calm, the same steady presence he had always been. When he caught her eye, he smiled and gave a small nod of encouragement. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "Just play like it's home." As the host introduced her, the audience applauded warmly. Lena walked out slowly, her long dress gliding across the stage floor. The room went quiet as she sat down at the grand piano. She looked around. The elegant chandeliers, the polished floor, the sea of expectant faces. Then her eyes landed on a few children sitting near the front, students from her music program. Their faces were lit with pride and wonder. That was all the courage she needed. She began to play. The melody started softly, like a whisper from the past. Each note carried a memory. The loneliness of her old apartment, the first dare, the moment the world stopped to listen. Then it grew stronger, more confident, full of warmth and light. Her fingers danced across the keys as if they were telling the story of every person who had ever been ignored, every dream that had almost been forgotten but somehow survived. The room was silent. Even the waiters had stopped moving. Every person there could feel something shift in the air, a kind of quiet truth that words could never express. When the last note faded, there was a moment of stillness before the applause began. It wasn't just polite clapping, and it was heartfelt, thunderous, full of admiration. Some people stood up cheering while others wiped away tears. Lena stood and bowed, her heart full. As she looked out over the crowd, her eyes met Mr. Harlow's. He wasn't clapping, he was smiling, proud and peaceful. After the performance, people surrounded her, offering congratulations and praise, but she quietly slipped away to the side of the stage to catch her breath. She leaned against the wall, feeling the cool air on her face, trying to take in what had just happened. A few moments later, Mr. Harlow joined her. "You did it again," he said softly. "You reminded everyone why we started this." Lena smiled through her tears. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." He shook his head gently. "You always had it in you. I just gave you a little push." They both laughed quietly, remembering that night, the dare that changed everything. In the weeks that followed, the foundation received more donations than ever before. The Music for Hope program expanded to new cities. Lena became not just a performer, but a mentor, a teacher, a symbol of what could happen when someone believed in themselves. But for her, the biggest reward wasn't the applause or the recognition. It was the letters she began receiving. Handwritten notes from people around the world. One said, "I was ready to give up on my dream, but after hearing your story, I started again." Another said, "Your music helped me through my hardest days. Thank you for reminding me that hope still exists." Each letter felt like a piece of her heart coming back home. One morning, she received a package with no name on it. Inside was a small old music box and a note that simply read, "Your mother would be proud." Tears filled her eyes. She wound up the box and listened to its soft tune, the same lullaby her mother used to hum when she was little. Somehow it felt like a message from beyond, a gentle reminder that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Months later, Lena was invited to a small community concert at a local school. She decided to go quietly, without telling anyone who she was. She sat in the back as children performed their pieces one by one. Some played clumsily, others shyly, but every note was sincere. Then one young girl walked on stage. She introduced herself in a soft voice and said, "This song is for someone who taught me that music can change your life." As the girl began to play, Lena recognized the melody and it was the dare, the piece she had written on that quiet night months ago. Her heart swelled. The girl didn't know she was in the audience, but that didn't matter. The music had found its way to someone else's heart, and now it was being shared again. When the concert ended, Lena waited until the crowd began to leave, then quietly walked over to the piano. She placed her hand on the keys for a moment and whispered, "Keep playing, little one." As she walked out into the evening air, she felt light, lighter than she had in years. Life had taken her from a forgotten corner of a hotel lobby to stages around the world, but what mattered most wasn't the fame or success. It was the journey, the people she met, the lives she touched, the music that connected them all. That night she sat by her window at home, the same small piano beside her. She began to play again, not for anyone else, not for the world, but for herself, for her mother, and for the music that had carried her through every storm. Outside, the city lights flickered softly, and the melody drifted into the night like a gentle promise that no matter how small or unnoticed someone might feel, there's always a moment waiting where their light will be seen. And for Lena, that light had finally found its home.